We have been blessed with another privilege to come together and worship God. As always, I pray what I say will be pleasing in His sight and that it will benefit each of us for our time together. It used to be song number 92 in our old scriptural song books. I don't know what it is in this one or if it's even in the book, but whenever we would sing the song, You Never Mentioned Him to Me Again, I would always feel very guilty in singing that song because of the emotions that it would bring up and thinking about all of the missed opportunities throughout my life, even probably throughout that very week when we were singing that song, of how many people that have passed through our lives that we've never even remotely mentioned anything to say to them about Jesus and talk to them about their soul. We've said it before, and honestly, every lesson that I bring is one that I need to hear myself. That's why I work on them. So hopefully we can find benefit in this, but we can talk to people about anything. Anything under the sun except the gospel. You want to know how the Reds are doing? Well, we can give you an earful on that. If someone says, "Hey, you look like you've lost some weight," even if they don't say that, I can tell them about the foods that we're eating and the exercise routine that we're doing. You want to hear about that? Probably some people that didn't want to hear about that have heard about that. We'll talk about that. Uh, some remedy to an ailment that we had, a warning to a product or a service that somebody might be thinking about buying. We'll give them detailed information on that. We're quick to spread good news or share a juicy, gossipy story that we may have. But when it comes to talking about Jesus and the gospel, we become mute. We can't say anything. Maybe it's out of fear. We talked about that this morning. We're afraid. That was something that maybe we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Maybe we're afraid of upsetting somebody. Maybe we're afraid of losing a friend. So we're just not going to say anything and for fear of upsetting them because we think we know how they'll respond when we start talking to them about their soul. Sadly, I saw a piece on the news a few days ago, the other day. I saw a thing on social media the other day, and I showed it to Jenny, and it said, when I say the other day, it could be anywhere from yesterday to 30 years ago. That's what I mean when I say the other day. But it was talking about being religious around the holidays. And I think it was referring to Christmas time. But the story was saying that roughly, not that many years ago, how many more people identified as being religious of some sort. They had some connection to a religion. And now fewer and fewer people identify with any religion at all. And that makes our job and our command, we're told to do this, to try to spread the word, all that more difficult because people are less interested in it than ever before. And many factors can play into why we don't necessarily want to share the gospel. But today, I would like us to talk about motivation, specifically having the right motivation in our evangelism. We can do it for the wrong reasons, or we can go into the motivation in talking to others for the right reasons. If we go at it with the wrong reasons, with the wrong way, then often we can do more harm than good. But that's where we are to be wise enough and have knowledge enough to properly handle God's word and to pray to God to help us to say the right things at the right time that will touch a person so that they will realize the condition of their soul. That's why we need to have the right motivation. Then that will get the job done. We have been given a job. That's something that I don't think I personally look at enough. That's my duty as a Christian, not just as a job of a preacher, but as a Christian to talk to others. I could preach the best lesson ever, which is not likely. There's always mistakes in them, but I could preach the best lesson that has ever been assembled. And if it doesn't go beyond the four walls of this building, it has done very little good if I don't put it into practice in my life. It won't do much good at all here because there's not that many people. We have a few extra listen online, but if I don't put that into practice in my life with the people that I cross paths with during the week, it hasn't done any good. And as a Christian, think about the world that we are out in, the other 160 some odd hours of the week when we're not together. I would say that most of us are not around other Christians all week. We couldn't be because we don't get to see each other very much. So whenever evangelism is not occurring, it's because we're the ones that are lacking the motivation in doing that, or don't have the proper motivation to do that. So what is motivation? Well, you see the picture of the train there, and motivation is an inner drive, an idea captured in the imagination that can be harnessed into intense drive towards a goal. And that is like the steam that harnesses that train to move. That train could have all of the components to make it go forward, but until we put the steam in the engine to give it the pressure to start moving, it is going to sit there motionless. Men and women who are motivated push themselves forward. They plow through the inevitable setbacks, heading ever toward their dreams. Motivation is essential to succeeding in any endeavor you try. That comes from Dennis Waitley, The Joy of Working. We see people that achieve great things, insurmountable things, because they were motivated to do that. It's like that steam that drives that train, that pushes it forward. If properly channeled, look at the large objects that it can move. But without it, it just sits there and doesn't accomplish anything. All the careful construction and preparation for travel. Now, we just took a vacation a few weeks ago. There was a lot of planning that went into that, on how we were going to get there, where we were going to stay, what we were going to do. All that went into that. But if the car or plane or train or whatever mechanism that we were using to get from point A to point B doesn't have any fuel in it, we're just going to sit there, aren't we? We're not going to go very far at all. If we're on a hill in a car and we put it in neutral, it may coast down that hill, but eventually it's going to stop because the motion will run out. Gravity will take over. And when it comes up to a flat space or another hill that it can't climb, it's just going to stop. So whatever we're thinking of, we need that motion to make action. Again, that vacation, we can have our destination chosen, our necessities all taken care of, accommodations booked, everything done in that location. But if we don't get there, then it does us no good. If motivation is properly channeled, it will get us to where we need to go. And sadly, despite the spiritual training and teaching and growth that we should be having, we're not motivated to get out and share the word. We're lacking that. So what should our motivation be? Well, we should look to Jesus like everything else. We can look to him as our example. In 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21, 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21, for to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps. It's interesting to note that word that is rendered there as example. and I'll not attempt to pronounce the original word there, but it occurs nowhere else in the New Testament. It means, the proper meaning of it is a writing copy, such as something that is set for a child. We could think of it as an outline or a sketch that we fill in. The design is set for us. It's up to us to fill in the blanks. Maybe think of a painter that has an outline drawn and they're drawing in the colors. It's a pattern for imitation. We know what a pattern or a blueprint would be in making something. If we follow that pattern, the product that we create will look like it's supposed to do that. We're to follow Jesus, the pattern, the example that he has left us, not just in his suffering, but in every aspect of his life. He left us the perfect example, the perfect blueprint. And the pattern is there for us to follow. And we're to look to him. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 2, the author and finisher, the completer of our faith. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus is the beginning of our faith, the beginner of our faith, or leader of our faith. That's what that word would express, that it's where it begins. He is the head of all those who have furnished an example of our faith. If we want to look to the top, then we look to Jesus. And that term finisher, that's what completes it. If we're doing a construction project and we have a finished carpenter, what do they come in and do? Well, they're the ones that come in and put the finishing touches on. They smooth everything out. They do the trim work. There's a rough carpenter and there's a finisher. Sometimes it's the same person, but they do the rough work and then they come back over with the finish work and do the details. Or the drywaller. I can hang drywall fine, but I can't finish it worth a diddly. That's the hard part, isn't it? I can't make it complete. My corners are jagged and rough. A good drywaller can make it smooth and perfect. That's how you can tell a professional from an amateur, because of the corners. You look at the hard place. Well, with our faith, that's what Jesus did. He finished it. He completed it. And it's perfect. Whatever he does and says has been true. And he occupies this highest level. He's beyond comparison of all others. He is the beginning of our faith, and it is the ending of our faith. As Revelation says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. So whatever motivated him should motivate us to save souls as well, to talk to them, to have concern for them. Well, what motivated the Lord? Well, his compassion for the lost. He was moved with compassion towards them when he saw them. Matthew chapter 9 and beginning in verse 35. He looked at them and he saw them wandering around, lost, like sheep without a shepherd. He had feelings for them. How about the people that we see today? We see them wandering around this world, aimless, lost, searching because they have no guidance for their souls. Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 35. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and scattered, like sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plentiful, but laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Are we truly moved with compassion when we see this? When we see people searching and groping for something that is missing in their life. Well, what's missing in our life is the need for salvation, the need to have purpose that God has given us. And people will look for it anywhere they think they can find it, and it's always in the wrong place when we follow man's wisdom. Do I have compassion for that, or do I feel anger and apathy? Well, most of the time it's anger and apathy. If I'm being honest, I'm not overrun with compassion for people. I think, well, why can't they do better? They should know better. This is how they're choosing to live. Were they any better or worse in the first century when Jesus looked out over those that were lost? He felt compassion for their souls. They were lost in sin. They needed Jesus. They needed what he was preaching. They still need him today. He cared about them then as well as today. He still cares for them. And he showed compassion throughout his public ministry when feeding the multitudes in Matthew chapter 14 and verse 14, feeding the 5,000. Part of the meaning of this is that the tender kindness, the extreme kindness and concern that he felt at the sight of the miseries of others. They had extreme need, and he was moved for that. Beginning in Matthew 14 and verse 14, and when Jesus went out, he saw a great multitude, and he was moved with compassion for them and healed their sick. He was moved because of the condition they were in. In chapter 15, in verse 32, feeding the 4,000 here. Now Jesus called his disciples to himself and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, lest they faint on the way. But his compassion was not limited to or focused on their physical needs, but they're truly on their spiritual needs. He sent out his apostles because of that compassion to preach to them, beginning in Matthew chapter 10. And in verse 1, Matthew chapter 10 and verse 1, and when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Now, if we study, we're going to see that kind of miraculous intervention does not happen to us today. Well, we don't have the power to heal diseases or to raise people from the dead. That was because of the new gospel that was being presented needed proof that they didn't have. We have the proof today in the scriptures. We have the completed scriptures. We don't need the signs and wonders that they did as that was being established. But we still should have compassion over those who are lost. Beginning in verse 5, these 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not go into the city of the Samaritans, but rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Go to them in the kingdom, or into the children of Israel, to the Jewish nation first. Yes, the rest of the world's going to be offered this, but go here first. Do we find ourselves filled with compassion for the lost and truly see what they are? We do get angry at what they do oftentimes. Why can't they do better? Why do they have to live like that? Why do they make those decisions? But we need to remember that's a soul that is represented in them, a soul that is lost, and a soul that needs saving. So how do we strengthen our compassion towards them? Well, we need to be taught to love. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 9, no, we're not going to have some direct interaction between us and God, imparting this great knowledge and this great feeling of love towards everyone. He's not going to come down to earth and to give us a direct lesson. It's something that we learn through his word and through the scriptures. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 9. But concerning brotherly love, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves are taught by God to love one another. We're taught by God today by studying his scriptures. And we can learn to love the way that we're supposed to. As we were talking, and I think, well, he's not here, so I'll talk bad about him now. He stepped out. Carl, I think, is the one that said that, about being taught. About, I think it was, we were still on the subject of anger. We may have been worried, but we were taught this. It's not something that's always natural. I'm not sure that love for others is a natural feeling for us. Maybe for our parents, maybe for those that do something for us. But for the world in general, we don't have love naturally for just everyone. Is that love, and many want to focus on that, is that love limited to the material needs? Well, as long as the food, clothing, and shelter are being met, then that's all we have to worry about. And what about the word? Well, what about their spiritual needs? I should care about those as much, if not more so. And the more that I meditate on God's word and see his love for us through the sacrifice of his son, then the more I should love others, because I can see that sacrifice was made for me and for them as well. How could we not grow in love and learn more in love? We can't move or become that island and escape as much as sometimes we would like to get away from people and escape those that are around us. We have to show good and set a proper example in front of them to influence them for good and have compassion on the lost. This morning when we were talking about anger, and one of our questions was the fruits of the Spirit that we should have towards one another is meekness. And I'm afraid that we mistake meekness for weakness. It's not. It's the opposite of being weak. If we are meek and love and care for others and put their needs above our own. So have we allowed God to fill our hearts with this compassion for the multitude of lost around us? Are we making an effort around us or around the people that we know and come in contact with to share this message with them? We're supposed to. With Jesus, when we look to him, he had a sense of purpose in what he did. And he was perfect in that. He was always setting the proper example in us. And the love that he was showing, to me, I cannot comprehend a fraction of that love. But if I'm not moved with compassion for someone in need, then I'm not sharing in God's love. 1 John chapter 3 and beginning in verse 16, by this we know love, because he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? And again, those needs, not just the material needs that someone had. It's the spiritual needs that are greater. And when we look at Jesus with his sense of purpose that I mentioned, we can see the difference in this world. We can easily see the difference between those who move with a sense of purpose in their steps versus those who do not, those who are aimless in what they do. Example, look at any restaurant, but we'll say fast food because it's a little more out front. When we go in the way that the restaurants are set up, and say a restaurant where you sit down and they bring your food to you. So if you go into a fast food restaurant, there could be 12 people behind the counter and they're moving around at a snail's pace. and they can't get your order right to save their life because they don't care. They don't have a sense of purpose. They don't have a work ethic. That's what we're talking about. When Jesus came to this earth, he knew what he had been sent here for, what his job was to do, and it was a motivating force. We see that in this conversation here in John chapter 4 with the Samaritan woman at the well. Beginning in verse 27, while he was speaking with her, notice his disciples were watching and listening to this and wondering, why is he talking to this woman? What is his motivation? Well, they find out. John chapter 4 and beginning in verse 27, at this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with a woman, yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" The woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and said to the men, "Come, see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" Then they went out of the city and came to him. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have food to eat of which you do not know." Therefore his disciples said to one another, "Has anyone brought him anything to eat?" Jesus said to them, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." There's my purpose. Verse 34, to do the will of the one who sent me, to accomplish his work. That was his food. That was what was sustaining him. That was what was motivating him. To do God's will. I have a job to do while I'm here. And he knew. Jesus knew that was the purpose in his life. And he stated that on many occasions. We'll look at several here in John. John chapter 5 beginning. And in verse 30, I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. And as we were talking and looking at his life, what he did and what he went through, as we thought about that coming around the Lord's table, he did that because that was God's will. We can see in his prayer, and we're going to look at John chapter 17 here in just a minute. He was not wanting to do this. Now, he was trying to, please let this cup pass from me. But not my will, but thy will. He knew what was going to happen. His motivation, his purpose was to serve God. Chapter 5 and verse 36, but I have a greater witness than John's, for the works which the Father has given me to finish. The very works that I do bear witness of me that the Father has sent me. I've been put on this earth for this purpose. That's, as Christians, aren't we put on this earth for a purpose as well? John chapter 6 and verse 38, for I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. What Jesus did, one, he did of his own free will. There is nothing to suggest that Jesus could have not done what he wanted to do. He had free will to choose. But secondly, he did it because he was doing the will of God. He did not act according to his own human emotions, but according to the infinite wisdom, goodness, and mercy of his Father in heaven. And in the Lord's Prayer in John chapter 17, we see that just before he was crucified. In John chapter 17 and in verse 4, he says, I have glorified you on earth. I have finished the work which you have given me to do. And again, this is John 17 is the actual Lord's Prayer. When he was praying to God, please, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. But he knew, John chapter 19, that he had to complete the work of God and complete his will. That's what he was sent here to do, and he did it. John chapter 19 and beginning in verse 28, after this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, said, I thirst. Now a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there, and they filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a hyssop, and put it to his mouth. So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he gave up the spirit. And when we think about him agonizing in his prayer in John chapter 17, knowing what was going to happen to him before his crucifixion, and then seeing this scene here in John 19, just a few hours later, it was all done because that was God's will. It was all part of his plan. We might go through things on this earth that might cause us pain. Maybe a surgery or some procedure that we know we have to have it, but we're still going to dread it because we're not looking forward to it. We know it's going to bring us pain. But what have we ever went through in our lives that can come even close to what the Lord went through on this fateful evening? Nothing that he had did caused this. It was all through sinful man. He didn't deserve anything that happened to him. But that's what his purpose was. He was sent here for that purpose, to save man. God's will is that no one should perish. He doesn't want anyone to be lost. John chapter 3 and verse 16, we should be able to say this from our heart. This was probably, if we were taught in a Bible class as a youngster, this was probably a memory verse at some point in time. John chapter 3 and verse 16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Again, that unimaginable love that God has shown for us. I don't want anyone to perish, but they have to believe on my Son. And that belief would produce obedience. Because then we'll have access to that great gift that he has given us, which is everlasting life. So we too are here. That sense of purpose with Jesus was to seek and save the lost. In Luke chapter 19 and verse 10, look around us, as he said, look at this harvest. It's ready. It's plentiful. The fields are ripe. And the harvest is waiting for us because of so many that are lost. Luke chapter 19 and verse 10, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. He didn't come in this world, and he didn't die on the cross to condone the sinful world in their actions and leave them in their sins. What did he say? No, I come to call the sinful to repentance. I've come here to talk to them about changing and to save them from their sins. That was his sense of purpose. That should be our sense of purpose, to put God first in our lives, in every aspect of it. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33, to put the Father's will ahead of everything else that I want to do. Jesus taught this, that we should, Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Put God first. This, Matthew 6 was what we were reading this morning about, I think it was, about worry and all the things that we can worry about. What are we going to eat? What are we going to wear? What are we going to do? What's this going to do? And what's that going to do? No, put God first. Your life will take care of itself if we have the Lord in the proper place. That's my motivation, isn't it? If I put God first, then everything else is going to fall into place where it belongs. But people often have different purposes for living, right? We place things above serving God. And these things in reality won't bring us anything in the long run. Nothing but hardship, nothing but temporary pleasure, because anything that we place above God is going to cost us our soul. Maybe it's our job. Maybe that's our purpose in life, the way that we live. Everything that I do is going to revolve around my job. And many people make that their identity as who they are. Or others make their families or friends or hobbies, material possessions. That's my reason for living. All of those are important in their place, but none are more important than our service to God. That's why He is to be first. We're going to pick up this evening with this, Lord willing, and we'll talk about having the right purpose in our motivation, and talk more about my motivation in evangelism. So if you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, we have this time set aside to think about the condition of our soul. And if there are changes that need to be made, then let's take care of that now while we have the opportunity, because every day we see someone and probably every day we see someone that we know of who had plans to do something, and something happened in their life that they did not get to achieve that goal that they had. If we're lucky, we get to wake up another day and have another chance at that. But we don't always know what tomorrow is going to bring. There's going to come a day that we don't wake up. So we need to be prepared and we need to be ready. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, we take this time and think about the condition of our soul, and let's make changes now while we have the opportunity as we stand and sing. What can wash away